Well, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for the weekend edition of Hebrew Word Study. I had mentioned 2 weeks ago in the one I sent out that I'd be working on this on a somewhat of a weekly basis. I'm finding out that this is taking a lot more study than I ever intended, but yet it is so rich and has been probably one of the best things I've done so far in moving forward and helping me to just immerse myself in translation and Hebrew word study. And so I apologize that maybe every other week because this was really slow, but I hope that you appreciate. Maybe it's a little over the top for many of you, might be a little bit too much. And again, I'm not trying to make this a college study because obviously I'm not qualified to do that in any way, shape, or form. But just to help you know that these study materials exist out there, and they are used by translators and as a level of study, there's no limit to how deep you can go, and the amount of material that's available is just incredibly vast and extremely fascinating. And so the purpose behind me sharing this is so you can maybe see I can share my own journey rather than just, go through this and have it occupy space on my computer. And that you just know that it's there. And maybe for some of you, it might pique your interest and motivate you in a direction you never thought you would ever go in before. And if that's the case, I certainly would love to share more with you and help you along that way. And so that's the real purpose of this, just sharing my own personal studies in hopes that it enriches your walk with God and brings you to a new and closer walk with Him. So we're picking up on Matthew chapter 5, the second part of verse 1. And we pick up here with the word He went up, which is, Allah al-Har va'acharei Cain. So it's not too much that we don't know already from this. This Allah means to go up. It has many different, very interesting meanings associated even to burnt offerings and the smoke arising up into the heavens. What I found interesting is the word har for mountain. It has a comets underneath the little T-shaped vowel marker, where normally it would have a patak, which is a straight line here, like underneath the ayin. All of biblical Hebrew would have a patak underneath it. And so this intrigued me quite a bit. I didn't come up with a great answer other than um, my thoughts here is perhaps the vowel was heightened to a comets, maybe because it once had a definite article. Looking at Joshua 11, verse 2, has a has the word har with a definite article in front of it, and then it is pointed with the comets whole vowel. And so I thought that was kind of interesting. Also, in the copy of the Matthew Harley that I have, it does not have any makafs. Biblical Hebrew would normally have a makaf between this um, word here of the Vachare and Cain. There'd be a little line here where my cursor is going that would indicate that you would join these words together and they would be um, actually pronounced like one word. And you'll find in many places in biblical Hebrew that the Cain, the 3651, is not even translated. They would just have an afterword. And the word thus wouldn't be there, even though in this very straightforward or wooden version, if you will, that I'm doing here, I wanted to put these words in just to identify them to help me with the parsing. And so you can see that. Um, as we move on to the next part is where I found some things that really challenged me and took me quite a while to work through. Um, so again, we have the picture here that Jesus is on this mountain, which could have been just a small knoll. I don't believe it was a mountain, 3,000 feet high up with snow on the top. This has to be a place where he can talk to people. It might have been a kind of a natural amphitheater. There are many examples of that from what I have read in the Middle East of places where you can have natural amplification, and surely Jesus would have taken advantage of that. One example is when he spoke from a ship that was cast out into the water a little ways and everybody sat on shore. That it is thought in some um, phenomenon to create a natural amphitheater, amplifies your words so that you're heard all through this. So that was the reason that he was choosing this location. And so the next one here, Yashav Vayigashu Elav Talmidav would be the Hebrew, and the understanding that he sat, I thought, caught my attention here because in most of our uh, public speaking today, whether it be at church or even in formal meetings or gatherings, the person who's speaking is always elevated on a platform, and the people who are speaking to would be sitting down. And it kind of just, I had a remiss about that, a little inward nudge saying, well, what does that mean? You know, what is there something special here? So I did a little research and found that there's an incredible amount of discussion about Middle Eastern culture of teachers sitting, teachers standing. Put some notes here that I'm going to take you into some uh, extra biblical literature that the sages use in a website called Sepharia, and it's called the Talmud. And so, for sake of time, took you right to this. It's Megillah 21a in the William Davidson Talmud, and they start talking about, and there's a lot of information here. It's just incredible how much thought the rabbis and the sages had given to this about a teacher shouldn't sit on the couch and teach his disciples while he's sitting on the ground. And this one says, well, you know, he should stand here with me. And then says this indicates that the teacher and his disciples should be in the same position. Here, regards to Torah study, the sages taught that from the days of Moses until the time of Rabbi Gamaliel, they would study Torah only while standing. But then when Rabbi died, weakness descended to the world and they would study Torah while sitting. And so it's very interesting just how much um, they put into this here. Verses about sitting and then standing and bowing. Um, Again, just incredible to see all of this being spelled out here. Um, and so I just wanted to leave that with you. Another place for reference here is if you go to the book of Nehemiah, chapter 8, verses 4 through 6, you'll find a time where Ezra is discovered the book of the law, found it in a temple, brings it out to the people, and it goes through, how he delivered. I believe he built a little platform, and as he started teaching, the people stood to listen, and they stood all day long. And I believe that verse has sparked somewhat of a movement that I've seen in churches, at least the ones I attend, over the past maybe 10 years, that people feel they need to stand out of respect for reading of God's Word. Prior to this, it was not done, and it has become, I'll say, a tradition, and people feel they show extra reverence by it. But again, it's you only have one verse here that gives any instance of it, and looking at the Sepharia and the Talmud, you can find that it wasn't always a tradition that was followed. There's no other biblical mandate for that. It's just a tradition that people have put in place, and it again makes some people feel like they're honoring God's word a little bit more than if they were sitting. But again, there's no scriptural reference other than in Nehemiah for this one instance. So that was kind of interesting. And then we get to the word for Yigashu, um, to draw near. Um, this can be found in Genesis 19, verse 9, and Genesis 43 and 19. Very similar understanding. And I like the concept of they drew near. I feel that really brings out what I envisioned was happening on this hillside, that they were drawn to Jesus and coming to him. Here's where my studies took quite a long diversion, and I spent many, many hours on trying to get through this. The next word is a lav, came to him. This is in, has an ending um, that is, it's a preposition, but it ends in a third person masculine plural ending, normally found on prepositions and in nouns. And so that sets up, it complements, that Jesus is speaking and emphasizes the third masculine singular. But then the next word is Talmidav, which is normally translated as disciple everywhere. Um, but yet when I thought of it, I thought, what's happening here? Why would he, in the midst of all these people coming and drawing near, suddenly talk about his disciples? I went back to chapter 4 of Matthew and found that at that point he's only called four disciples, Andrew and Peter, and James or Jacob, if you will, and John. So there's only four. Were the other ones there? I don't really know, but at least at this point, only four have been spoken of. And that his purpose, if you look at what we're going to go into eventually, which are the Beatitudes or Ashrays, um, the Sermon on the Mount, he's not just speaking to the disciples, he's speaking to all the people. And there's no more reference to just specifically the disciples. And so this just messed with me a little bit here. And I was just trying to think of what, is there another meaning here other than just disciple? Um, Looking at the breakdown of this word, I was drawn to Isaiah 54 and 13, where it says, and all your children will be taught by Yud-He Vav-He, or Yahweh. And again, I saw parallels between that verse and what was happening here, and realizing that all the words in Hebrew come from an action. Disciple is a noun, but it makes reference to someone who's learning, someone who's being taught. The root word of Lamed, Mem, and Dalit is to learn. And so I began just dwelling on that and thinking, well, is there room for an interpretation that he began to teach from this point? Because you'll see when we get into the verse next time, he opens his mouth and starts teaching. So this just flowed very nicely, that they came near to him and he began to teach. Obviously, no one else translated it that way, and I didn't find strong support other than a few things here of in Marcus Jastro's pages 1672 and 73, has some somewhat similar thoughts. Takes you in the Mishnah to Pirkei Avot, uses the exact same word with exact same pointing. That's another thing I found, is the vowel pointings are not always identical, and so I was happy to find one that was comparable in the Pirkei Avot, which is a very popular, one of the most popular extra books that are written. It's basically the traditions of the fathers, and has a lot of wonderful things that parallel many, many of Jesus's teachings. Um, and then looking at what Jastrow would say about the Tav maybe being a performative letter. And sure enough, here he mentions it. It's actually putting a Tav in front of a verb changes it into a noun. And talks about secondary verbs. And so I thought that was actually very, very interesting. Also, I went to Kavad, which has a book called the letters, talks about the letters of the Hebrew alphabet. And so it's called the Letters of Light. And if you go online, it's free. You can search it out. It has so much information about just what the letter Tav means, and even references of the Tav being revealed in these letters when the Messiah comes. And so that was also very, very interesting. I did notice something in um, another thing in Psalm 145, verse 20, where they actually have a verb that has a third masculine singular ending on it, just like the word for disciple does, or to be taught. And so they're using this, what is normally thought to be a ending that would only be on a noun, they're using it here on a verb. And so again, Hebrew has some nuances to it, has some things that kind of break outside of the rules. And so I thought of that, and it just fit well with how I pictured the interpretation um, being. And so not sure if any Bible scholars would ever agree with me on that, but I like to know that the word for disciple basically breaks down to teaching, and that the word Talmud, or the what is I would say incorrectly translated as the law, but the Talmud is that teaching that it expounds God's word and helps us to better understand it. And so I hope that wasn't too over the top or too deep for any of you, and I hope you enjoy just the beauty again of what can be studied, and how a person can take, like I did, this one word on Talmudav, and I've spent hours and hours and hours researching and looking through the reference material that's available and the cross references in God's Word. When you look at the Hebrew, you can see how these come together and support one another, and can really enhance our relationship and our thoughts about God as we meditate upon His Word. So thank you so much. God bless you all, and we'll see you next time. Bye bye.